Prabhu. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll start from again. The first 8 verses summarize Devotee Mother's prayers. This is the most important section of the chapter. Then Kapila Muni gives the final instructions to Mother Devotee from verse 9 to 12, asking her to be fearless before leaving home. And then from verse 13 to 32, we read about how Mother Devotee attains this perfection by following the instructions of Lord Kapila. And after that, we touch upon the activities of Lord Kapila after he leaves home, about how he goes to the Himalayas, and then from there he traverses back along the path of the Ganges to Gangasagar. And then we conclude the chapter with the Falashruti in verses 36 and 37. It's a very, very important canto, as are all the other cantos. It's a long canto, but also a very, very important canto. We'll now move to the Mother Devahuti's prayers. We'll move directly to that. I'll continue to share my screen. I hope you are able to see the screen. I'm just reducing it a little bit so that it's easier to scroll. Text 1. So I will read the verse. I will request one of the Prabhujis or Matajis to read the translation. Then we can go through the important points in the purport. Maitreya Vacha Evam Nishamya Kapilasya Vacho Janitri Sakardamasya Daita Kila Devahuti Virastamoha Patalatam Abhipranamya Tushtavatatva Vishayankita Siddhi Bhumim. Somebody wants to read the translation? Please unmute yourselves.
Hare Krishna. Can I read?
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Sri Maitreya said, thus Devahuti, the mother of Lord Kapila and wife of Kardam Muni, became freed from all ignorance concerning devotional service and transcendental knowledge. She offered her obeisances unto the Lord, the author of basic principles of Sankhya system of philosophy, which is the background of liberation, and she satisfied him with the following verses of prayer. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. So, as I said out here now that Kapila Muni has given the instructions. Now she is fully satisfied. So the entire darkness that was there, she was bewildered with the illusion, under the illusion of Maya. That's all been dispelled now. And she now addresses Kapila Muni and offers prayers. So in the purport, what Prabhupada writes and the sense of the purport is that liberation through Sankhya philosophy. He talks about liberation through Sankhya philosophy, but the ultimate goal is, of course, devotional service to the Lord. So Devahuti, through the teachings of Lord Kapila, attained freedom from ignorance and gained transcendental knowledge. And Lord Kapila's Sankhya philosophy served as a foundation for spiritual realization and liberation. And Prabhupada further emphasizes that understanding the Sankhya philosophy allows individuals trapped in the material world to break free from the material bondage. And Devothi's prayers in this whole thing that is demonstrating not only her liberation and satisfaction with the Lord. So from the purport, the key takeaway that is there for us, and I will encourage all of you to please go through the purports in detail, is that Sankhya philosophy offers a pathway to liberation even while living in the material world, leading to spiritual realization and freedom from material bondage. I think the key point here is that ultimately it is bhakti and devotional service which will lead us to this pathway of liberation. We'll continue reading the verses. Now, Mother Devotee will offer the prayers. Devotir Vacha. Atapyajo anta salile shayanam bhutendriyarthatma mayam vapuste
Pravaham sadate satijam satyau
Swayam yaj prabja jatah. Yes, somebody can read the translation. Any Mataji Prabhuji wants to read the translation?
Hare Krishna. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Translation. And Devahuti said, Brahma is said to be unborn because he takes the birth from the lotus flower which grows from your abdomen while you lie in the ocean at the bottom of the universe. But even Brahma simply meditated upon you, whose body is the source of unlimited universes.
Hare Krishna. We'll read verse 3 also, and then we'll go to the important points in the purports. Sa eva vishvasya bhavan vidatte guna pravahena vivakta virya sargadyaviho vidata visundher atmeshwaro tarkya sahasra shakti. Translation. So, Prabhuji's Mataji, anyone, Kanjin Prabhu, do you want to read the translation for this also?
Yeah.
My dear
My
Lord,
dear
all
Lord,
those
my dear Lord, although personally you have nothing to do, you have distributed your energy into the interactions of the material modes of the nature. And for that reason, the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation takes place. My dear Lord, you are self-determined and are the and are the supreme personality of Godhead for all the living entities. For them, you created this material manifestation, and although you are the one, you diverse energies can act multifariously. This is inconceivable to us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So here again, Devahuti, Mother Devahuti again also is expressing about the astonishing birth of Brahma. So Brahma is the person who has actually created all the universes, right? And he is coming from the Navi of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So the purport Prabhupada covers, he speaks about, he says Brahma is known as Aja, the unborn, who directly was born from the body of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead lying in the ocean at the bottom of the universe. And despite being born directly from the Lord, Brahma still had to meditate for many years to see him. The Lord's gigantic body is transcendental and untouched by matter. It existed before the material creation, and the material manifestation has come from his body. And the Lord's birth from Devahuti, therefore, abdomen is astonishing, as he is the source of all creation, but he kindly took birth as her child. So here, the astonishment is around the fact that here you have Brahma, who is the creator of the entire universe. He creates. He is born from the navel of Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu. And here you have the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is taking birth, from the abdomen of a mortal living being. And those are the, this is how the Lord bewilders us, because he's transcendental. He can do anything he wishes. So also a lesson for us is, let us not try to understand or find an answer of why. Because he is God. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord's transcendental nature and his ability to manifest the entire universe from his body are awe-inspiring, while his birth as an ordinary child from a common woman demonstrates his inconceivable mercy and compassion. I think the important word there is mercy and compassion. So his mercy and compassion towards his pure devotees, he decides to come and be born in the devotee's abdomen. In the next purport, Prabhupada emphasizes on the Supreme Lord's inconceivable energies and his control. So he says that the absolute truth possesses diverse energies and is completely aloof from the activities of material nature and the three gunas. The modes of material nature are entrusted to different manifestations, but the Supreme Lord remains unaffected and self-determined. So he's both within and without. The Supreme Lord's will cannot be checked. Repeating, the Supreme Lord's will cannot be checked or influenced by anyone else. He is the ultimate controller. And in today's world, we see that, we try to find an answer for everything. And if there is no rational explanation, we discard it and say that, no, that is not possible. And this is where it's very important to understand that here, the person whom we are talking about is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom the whole universe has been manifested. And for him, his will cannot be checked or influenced by anyone else because he is the ultimate controller and he can do what he wants. The creation is made for the living entities who desire to enjoy or dominate material nature. Why are we born in this material world? Because we wanted to dominate material nature. Because we wanted to enjoy. We had this entire mentality of being the proprietor. And the Supreme Lord, because he's so merciful and so compassionate, he fulfills the various desires, our various desires, through his inconceivable energy, which is not comprehensible in this pea-sized brain that we have. So Prabhupada used some analogies also in his purport. He says, man proposes and God disposes. God's desires are not dependent on anyone else's control. Man's desires will be dependent. God's desires are not dependent. So the takeaway for us in this from the purport is that the Supreme Lord's inconceivable power, its inconceivable power, allows him to effortlessly accomplish what may seem inconceivable for ordinary living entities. So it might be inconceivable for us, but that does not mean it's inconceivable for or not achievable for the Supreme Lord. So let's not do that to compare ourselves to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and assume that because we can't do it, God can't do it. We'll continue reading the prayers now. Text 4. Satvam brito me jatarena natha katham no yasyodara etadasit vishvam yugante vatapatra ekaha shete sma maya shishurangripanah. Can one of the Prabhujis or Matajis please read the translation for text 4?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Satyadev Prabhu.
Yeah. As the Supreme Translation, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have taken birth from my abdomen. Oh my Lord, how is it possible for the Supreme One who has in his belly all the cosmic manifestation? The answer is that if it is possible, for at the end of the millennium, you lie down on a leaf of a banana tree, and just like a small boy, you lick the toe of your lotus feet. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, it's banyan tree. I was listening to a lecture by Gurijan Prabhu also, and he called it a banana tree. And then he corrects himself. He said that I'm feeling very hungry. Maybe I need to go to Mayapur and have prasad. Yeah, and over here again, she's expressing her bewilderment also, but she's also telling the answer that it is possible. That how could here the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from who has the entire cosmic manifestation has taken birth, from his belly comes the entire cosmic manifestation. How is it that he takes birth in my abdomen? And then she also gives the answer saying, it is possible, And she gives the example of Vadapatrashai. So in the purport, Prabhupada, he elaborates on the transcendental pleasure of the Lord's lotus feet. It's a very sweet purport, and you should read this purport in full, where he talks about Vadapatrasha. He talks that the Lord sometimes appears as a small baby lying on a banyan leaf during the dissolution of the universe. So it's so chaotic at that time, right? The entire dissolution of the universe is happening, and here the Lord decides to appear as a small baby lying on a banyan leaf. And what is he doing? Can anyone say that? What is the baby doing? So
sucking his tooth.
Yes, Mataji. He's sucking his toe. So we have seen babies do that. I think I must have done that. I don't know whether I did that, but he's sucking his toe. But the reason why is he doing that? Vanilla Mataji.
He thinks that very saintly persons are attached to his lotus feet and want the nectar of his lotus feet, so he wants to taste it himself.
Yes, but the time also he chooses is so unique. He chooses the time of the dissolution of the universe to taste that nectar and experience that. Now that is the Lord. That's also the transcendental pleasure of the lotus feet of the Lord. So Devati understands that if the Lord can float as a baby on the leaf, so as a baby on the leaf, then it's not astonishing for him to reside within her abdomen. And the Lord's act of licking his own lotus feet signifies the transcendental pleasure found in the devotion of his devotees. So we know about why Lord Chaitanya appeared. And Lord Chaitanya appeared as an incarnation of Lord Krishna. He appears as a devotee to relish the sweetness experienced by the topmost devotee, Srimati Radharani. So in the analogies and examples also Prabhupada elaborates, he says the ability to lie down on a banyan leaf, the Lord's ability during the devastation, is compared to his ability to reside within the abdomen of a common woman. The Lord's act of licking his own toe represents his relishing of the transcendental pleasure that his devotees aspire for. So that's the goal of our life, is to be at the lotus feet of the Lord. And that's what, I at least am aspiring for also, is, to get that opportunity to get as close as possible, hopefully one day. We move to now text 5. Tvam deha tantra prashamaya papam papmanam nidesha bhajam cha vibho vibhutaye yathavatarās tava sukaradayas tathayam apyatma pathopalabdhaye. Somebody wants to read the translation? Hare Krishna. Okay, I will read the translation. My dear Lord, you have assumed this body in order to diminish. Yes. Somebody wants to read, Prabhu?
Yes, my dear Lord, you have assumed this body in order to diminish the sinful activities of the fallen and to enrich the knowledge in devotion and liberation. Since these sinful people are dependent on your direction by your own will, you assume incarnation as a boar and as other forms. Similarly, you have appeared in order to distribute transcendental knowledge to your dependents. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mama. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami. So we have read this in the Bhagavad Gita also. And again, the Lord will appear for a particular reason. And here he came to give that Sankhya philosophy and the directions to us so that we can achieve that ultimate goal, which is the lotus feet of the Lord. So, in the purport, Prabhupada elaborates on the purpose of the Lord's appearance, which I just mentioned now, and the distribution of transcendental knowledge. As I said, the Lord assumes incarnations to diminish the sinful activities of fallen beings and impart knowledge in devotion and liberation. Living entities are conditioned by the desire to lord it over material nature. And they are given different bodies by the Lord according to their propensities. And when there are discrepancies in the fulfillment of the material existence purpose, the Lord appears as an incarnation to guide and enlighten the fallen souls. Lord Kapiladeva is an incarnation of Godhead who appeared on earth to provide the transcendental knowledge to the misguided, conditioned souls. So there's also a reason why a Varnashrama system is there. There's also a reason why, there are so many species on the planet. And we need to live according to the way we are supposed to live. If we try to be someone else, then of course, the entire principles of dharma will collapse. And eventually one day will come wherein, the entire annihilation happens. And that's the reason that, we slowly descending. We are declining with time. Next 6. Yannamadeya Shravananu Kirtanad Yat Prahavavanad Yat Smaranadapi Kvachit Shvadopi Sadhyah Savanaya Kalpate Kuta Punaste Bhagavannu Darshanat. Hare Krishna. Anybody wants to read the translation?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, I'll read it.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
To say nothing of the spiritual advancement of persons who see the Supreme Person face to face, even a person born in a family of dog eaters immediately becomes eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices if he once utters the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or chants about him, hears about his pastimes, offers him obeisances, or even remembers him.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sri Gopal Prabhu. So here we see about the power of chanting of the holy name and what happens after that, which is you become immediately eligible and purified. So Prabhupada in his purport, he says, chanting, hearing, or remembering the holy name of the Supreme Lord has immense spiritual potency. By engaging in devotional service, one becomes freed from the reactions of all sinful activities. Chanting the holy name immediately purifies a person and makes him eligible to perform even Vedic sacrifices, regardless of their birth or past sinful activities. Chanting the holy name without offense makes one as respectable as a learned Brahmana and surpasses the need for other reformatory processes. As an analogy, Prabhupada uses in the purport, he says the chanting of the holy name is compared to a chemical process that transforms base metal into gold. That is, changing a person into a Brahmana. It's like, it acts like an alchemist and it transfers a base metal into gold. So here we are seeing the power of chanting. And he says that just by chanting even once, even a dog eater, Chandala, can rise up and achieve that state. Can anyone give an example of, we are familiar with this, quite a few examples, but anyone can share any example of any such persons that we have read so far in our scriptures? Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji. So, So there are quite a few examples. Even you see that even if I'm right, also Haridas Thakur also was there. So he was not born as a Brahmana, right? But then he got the elevated post of Namacharya. So that is the powerful power of chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We'll continue text 7. Aho batashva pacho to gariyan yajjivagre vartate namatubhyam te pustapaste juhuvuhu sasnurarya brahmanuchurnama grinanti ete. Translation: Oh, how glorious are they whose tongues are chanting your holy name. Even if born in the families of dog eaters, such persons are worshipable. Persons who chant the holy name of your Lordship must have executed all kinds of austerities and fire sacrifices, and achieve all the good manners of the Aryans. To be chanting the holy name of your Lordship, they must have bathed at the holy places of pilgrimage, studied the Vedas, and fulfilled everything required. So here Mother Devahuti is continuing to elaborate on the glorious effects of chanting of the holy name. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that chanting the holy name of God immediately purifies and elevates a person to perform even the Vedic sacrifices. Chanters of the holy name have already fulfilled all Vedic rituals. So it's as good as that. So once a person who is able to chant the holy name without offense in a completely conscious way has already fulfilled all Vedic rituals, sacrifices, and good behavior that is needed. The power of the holy name surpasses all other rituals and qualifications. Chanting the singular holy name of the Supreme Lord is sufficient. There is no need to chant all the names. See, Prabhupada is emphasizing on this, saying, just the singular holy name of the Supreme Lord is sufficient. Chanting the holy name must be done with a pure mentality, solely to please the Supreme Lord. Why do we chant every day our rounds, And at that time, are we doing this for the pleasure of the Lord? So I try to remind myself, Prabhujis and Matajis, when I'm chanting that, also off and on, because the mind is like this monkey that keeps jumping. It keeps going from here to there. Just keep on reminding myself that, is my chanting pleasing the Lord? Asking myself that question. So when I was reading this purport, I was reminded of that, which is, solely to please the Lord, and must be done with a pure mentality, not for any other material gain or material sense gratification. As I had said, Prabhupada used the example also of Haridas Thakur, who was born in a non-Vedic family and became a renowned authority on the holy name due to his offenseless chanting. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Advaita Acharya recognized his purity and authority. So the key takeaway for us from this verse and the purport is that chanting of the holy name of the Lord with genuine devotion and without offense bestows purification and spiritual advancement regardless of one's birth or previous rituals. So let's hold on tightly to our chanting beats and every day try to chant with devotion and sincerity, with attention, without making those offenses, to please the Lord, the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, the last prayer of Devahuti Mother is there. So, Tam tvamaham brahma param pumamsam pratyaksotasyatmani samvibhaya bhavyam Swatejasadvasta guna pravaham Vande Vishnum Kapilam Vedagarbham. Yeah, Mataji Prabhuji, anybody wants to read the translation? Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll read.
I can read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Please read.
I believe, my Lord, that you are Lord Vishnu himself under the name of Kapila, and you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman. The saints and sages, being freed from all the disturbances of the senses and mind, meditate upon you. For your mercy only can one become free from the clutches of the three modes of material nature. At the time of dissolution, all the Vedas are sustained in you only. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sri Gopal Prabhu. So, here again, we see the recognition of Lord Kapila as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that he is the path to realization. So, here Devahuti acknowledges Lord Kapila as Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada emphasizes that devotees, free from disturbances of the senses and the mind, meditate on the Lord for liberation. Pratyahara, withdrawing the senses from material activities, is crucial for realization. So, detachment and attachment are two sides of the same coin. While on one side, we need to detach ourselves from this material world and the ideas of sense gratification, we need to attach ourselves to that higher purpose and the higher Supreme Lord. And that is what is important. So on one side, pratyahara is needed, which is withdrawing the senses from material activities. And then the attachment happens, the realization also comes with it. Engaging in devotional service allows one to understand the Supreme Lord in full Krishna consciousness. So that is the only path. While you might follow all the other paths, there's only one path that allows you to understand the Supreme Lord in full Krishna consciousness, and that is through the path of devotional service. So Devahuti, in this verse, actually, she's concluding that as a woman, she cannot worship Lord Kapila through elaborate prayers. And her intention is to satisfy the Lord, and she recognizes that true realization is possible when the senses are withdrawn from material distractions. So she realizes the limitations as a woman, and that now Kardama Muni has left the house, and Kapila Muni is also leaving the house. Leaving the house is not an option for Devahuti. Mother Devahuti needs to stay in the house, but now that she has got that knowledge from Kapila Muni, she knows also that it is possible to achieve that end goal, which is the lotus feet of the Lord, is possible when the senses are withdrawn from material distractions. Now we'll continue to read. We'll go to now the next part of this particular chapter, wherein now Kapila Muni, before leaving home, will give the final instructions to Mother Devahuti. So in text 9, now Maitreya Muni is speaking. Maitreya Vacha.
Vidito Bhagavan Evam Kabilakya.
Please continue, Mother. You want to read the shloka? Please.
Maitreya Uvacha Idito Bhagavan Evam Kabilakya Parasbhuman Vacha Viklavayetyaha Mataram Matruvatsalaha.
Hare Krishna. Please read the translation also. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapila, satisfied by the words of his mother, towards whom he was very affectionate, replied with gravity. So it's important here. I think there's no purport in the. I'll just quickly go through the purport also. We'll see that here Lord Kapila is showing his affection and respect towards his mother. So here there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but since he is born as the son of Mother Devahuti, he is exemplifying the mother-child relationship and is also setting an example. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila, displayed complete affection towards his mother. Despite being the all-perfect Lord, Kapila respectfully responded to his mother's words. Kapila's response was marked by gravity, demonstrating a seriousness and deep respect. It was not playful. The interaction between Kapila and his mother exemplifies the loving relationship and mutual respect between a mother and child. Hare Krishna. Beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada. Just the key points here. But please read the full purport also. We'll move to the next verse, verse number 10. Now Kapila Muni will start. Lord Kapila will speak. Kapila Vacha Margenanena Mataste Susevye Nodite me Astite ina param Kashtham Achirad Avarotasyasi. Translation.
The personality of Godhead said, my dear mother, the path of self-realization which I have already instructed to you is very easy. You can execute this system without difficulty, and by following it, you shall very soon be liberated, even with your present body.
Hare Krishna. Kapila Muni is now seeing that his mother is a bit concerned also, and she's also a bit disappointed that he is leaving. So she's reassuring her that she will get liberation through devotional service, and she's saying it is not going to be a difficult process for you. You can achieve it. And Prabhupada in his purport, he elaborates this and he says that devotional service, when performed with faith and under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, it leads to liberation even within the present body. So there is hope for all of us also that in the present body also, we can achieve that state. In devotional service, one can be certain of attaining the perfectional stage and being liberated from the clutches of material energy or Maya. So we are either under the control of Maya or under the control of Krishna. We need to make that choice under whose control we want to be. And where there is Krishna, there is no Maya. Liberation is not dependent on the bodily symptoms of the spiritual master. And this is, I think, Prabhupada here is referring to about when people start judging the spiritual master, but on recognizing their spiritual qualities and following their instructions. He's emphasizing on the importance on following the spiritual masters. And that also there in the takeaway later, I'll mention that. And he says that liberation means being situated in one's own constitutional position, which is as eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, Jivera Swarupa Haya Krishnera Nityadasa. So neophytes, he mentions that they have doubts about the liberation status of the spiritual master or question their material affairs. But he also mentions that the focus of the neophyte should be on their unwavering dedication to serving the Lord. The spiritual master's unwavering dedication to serving the Lord. The liberation of the practitioner is based on their engagement in devotional service, regardless of their material circumstances. We'll now continue. Shraddhat Svaitam Matam Mayam Jushtam Yat Brahmavadibihi Yena Mama Bhayam Yaya Mrityum Richantyadat Vidaha. Translation. Anyone wants to read the translation? Prabhuji's Mataji's.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam Mataji.
My dear mother, those who are actually transcendentalists certainly follow my instructions as I have given them to you. You may rest assured that if you traverse this path of self-realization perfectly, surely you shall be freed from fearful material contamination and shall ultimately reach me. Mother, persons who are not conversant with this method of devotional service certainly cannot get out of the cycle of birth and death. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Again, it's so important. The importance of the whole canto is emphasized here, and especially from chapter 25 onwards till 32. Kapila Muni's instructions are so important. And he's again continues to address the concerns of his mother and elaborates that liberation is possible through devotional service. He's emphasizing that follow the instructions of Lord Kapila, and that will lead to self-realization, liberation from material contamination. Prabhupada also mentions that the path of devotional service is a means to transcend material existence and be free from anxiety and fear. Those unaware of this process remain trapped in the cycle of birth and death. We are also so fortunate to have all these translations and purports of Srila Prabhupada, because of which we are able to at least gain insights and understand for our own benefit the process that has been spelled out by Kapila Muni. So our takeaway is that by diligently practicing devotional service, importantly, it is diligently practicing devotional service, one can attain liberation and ultimately reach the Supreme Lord. The final verse before Kapila Muni now leaves is over, and now Maitreya Muni will elaborate here. He says, Maitreya Ovacha Iti pradarshya Bhagavan Satim Tam Atmano Gatim Swamatra Brahmavadinya Kapilo Anumato Yayau. Translation. Sri Maitreya said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila, after instructing his beloved mother, took permission from her and left his home, his mission having been fulfilled. So he has completed what he set out to achieve, and he left the house. Prabhupada in the purport, he uses the example of Kapila Deva for cultivating Krishna consciousness. And there he elaborates on Kapila Deva's mission. He says that Kapila Deva's mission was to distribute transcendental knowledge of Sankhya philosophy filled with devotional service. So while he elaborates on Sankhya philosophy, while he elaborates on Ashtanga Yoga, he says that nothing is better than bhakti, and the ultimate goal and the ultimate is also that only. The sadhana as well as the means to the goal is bhakti. Having fulfilled his mission by imparting knowledge to his mother and the world, Kapila Dev took permission and left home. Kapila Dev's departure from home demonstrates the ideal of remaining alone as a brahmachari, sannyasa or vanaprastha to cultivate Krishna consciousness. Those unable to live alone are allowed to live in a household life, but with the purpose again of cultivating Krishna consciousness rather than seeking sense gratification. So Prabhupada again elaborates on this, that even whichever ashrama we are in, we need to focus, that purpose has to be to cultivate Krishna consciousness. So Kapila Dev's example teaches the importance of cultivating Krishna consciousness throughout one's life, whether through living alone or within a household, with the ultimate goal of spiritual realization. Text 13. So now this section is it's a bit a long section from 13 to 32, but I will move a bit fast also. Here it's about how Devavati Mata attains perfection. So what did she do to attain that perfection? Sachapi tanayo yoktena yogadeshena yoga yuk tasmin ashrama apide sarva saraswatyah samahita. Translation. Okay. Hare Krishna Prabhu, please read.
As instructed by her son, Devhuti also began to practice Bhakti Yoga in that very ashrama. She practiced Samadhi in the house of Kardama Muni, which was so beautifully decorated with flowers that it was considered the flower crown of the river Saraswati. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Kardama Muni, he was a mystic yogi also, and his house was full of all opulences. In fact, in the subsequent verses, we will get a flavor of what kind of comforts and opulences were there in that house in which Devoti, Mother Devoti was staying. So Prabhupada elaborates on Devoti's exemplary practice of Bhakti Yoga at home. So it's also reassuring for us that practice of Bhakti Yoga is possible at home, and practice of exemplary practice of Bhakti Yoga is also possible. So how was that? How did that happen? So Devoti followed the instruction of her son Kapila Muni and practiced Bhakti Yoga in her home, the ashrama of Kardama Muni. She did not leave her house, as it is not recommended for women to do so, being dependent and under the care of her husband and son. I had mentioned this earlier, she is not allowed to leave the house. Despite the option to leave, Devahuti chose to remain at home and wholeheartedly engage in Bhakti Yoga. Her practice of Bhakti Yoga transformed her home into a beautifully adorned place compared to a flower crown on the river Saraswati. So the purport emphasizes Devahuti's adherence to her prescribed roles and responsibilities as a woman, while simultaneously cultivating her spiritual life within her domestic environment. It again reemphasizes that in whichever varna and ashrama we are, that's our safety net for us. But we need to follow the principles that are prescribed for us in that particular varna and ashrama, while simultaneously cultivating our spiritual life. Text number 14. Abhikshnavagaha kapishan jatilan kutila lakan atmanam chogra tapasa bibrati chirinam krisham. Translation. So some Prabhuji Mataji want to
Hare
read.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Anandram Prabhuji, Dandavataram. Let me read Prabhu. She began to bathe 3 times daily, and thus her curling black hair gradually became grey. Due to austerity, her body gradually became thin, and she wore old garments.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. So as I said that even in the house, it is possible. So she practiced austerity even when Kardama Muni was there in the presence of her husband. And after her departure also, she now continues to practice that austerity. So if you remember, before Kardama Muni transforms her completely, she was practicing a lot of austerity and her hair was matted and stuff like that. Now it's essentially again back to that stage wherein now mother is again practicing those austerities. And the austerities included bathing 3 times daily, which is practice followed by the yogis, brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis. So what happens because of that? Devati's body became thin due to the severe austerity, which is considered favorable for spiritual advancement. Which means I need to do a lot of effort now to become thin by practicing severe austerity. It is essential to avoid excessive eating, sleeping, and seeking comfort in order to progress in spiritual understanding. Example that was given, of course, is Devati's adherence to austerity, including bathing 3 times daily, and her resulting thin physique demonstrated her commitment to spiritual practices. So demonstration of the austerity that you perform also is in a way, it's a demonstration of your commitment to spiritual practice, our commitment. Text 15. Prajapate kardamasya tapo yoga vichrim vitam swagarha stham anaupanpamyam Prathyam Vaimani Api. Translation. Please unmute yourself if you want to read the translation.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
The home and household paraphernalia of Kardama, who was one of the Prajapatis, was developed in such a way by dint of his mystic powers of austerity and yoga that his opulence was sometimes envied by those who travel in outer space in airplanes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So Prabhupada again elaborates that, in those days clearly airplanes were there also. And the opulence of this ashrama was envied in the celestial realm. It was so beautiful. It says, Kardama Muni's household and opulence were so remarkable that even celestial beings traveling in outer space envied him. The reference to persons who travel in outer space pertains to the denizens of heaven who possessed advanced airships capable of interplanetary travel. The Srimad Bhagavatam mentions numerous instances of interplanetary travel and indicates the existence of facilities for such journeys, particularly in higher planetary systems. Kardama Muni's extraordinary mode of travel involved an airplane resembling a city, showcasing his exceptional mystic yogic powers and eliciting envy from the heavenly inhabitants. When I was reading this, I was thinking about one interaction that I had with someone, and he was referring to our scriptures as mythology. As you know, they call it Hindu mythology. And there are 2 or 3 times this happened. And then I had to interject and I told him that this is not mythology. So you should not call it mythology. It is real. He didn't have an answer. He didn't continue that argument with me. But I was just thought of just sharing that with you, that often people think that these are not possible. It is just that nobody has achieved it. And that's why we think it's not possible. It was possible those days. Nobody ever thought that we could travel to the moon till we actually traveled to the moon. So our human brain and our ego is such that we want to see things happen. Till then, we don't believe it. But clearly, as Prabhupada is emphasizing, all these things were already happening then. Next verse. Payafena nibas shaya danta rukmapa parichadaha da ashanani cha hemani susparshasta ranani cha. Hare Krishna. Somebody wants to read the translation?
The opulence of the household of Kardamuni is described herein. The bedsheets and mattresses were all as white as foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory and were covered by cloths of lace with golden filigree, and the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows.
Hare Krishna. So again, they are explaining, how opulent this whole place was, the opulence and value, even in those Vedic household life, and Prabhupada further elaborates. He says that the opulence of the household is displayed through valuable jewels, first-class marble and golden furniture. He talks about the clothing which is adorned with golden filigree. I don't know what is filigree, by the way. I think it must be embroidery, but Prabhupada uses such words also. Sometimes I struggle. And he mentions that in Vedic culture, household items are valuable and could be exchanged immediately if needed. And he says Indians still follow this practice by keeping metal utensils, gold ornaments, and valuable garments with gold embroidery. So we'll now continue reading. Text 17. Swachhasfatika kudyeshu mahamarka marakateshu cha ratna pradipa bhanti lalana ratna samyutah. Translation.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The walls of the house were made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Again, just emphasizing, in terms of what level of advancement they had, and this is a Vedic household we are talking about. It's not a king's palace, it was a Vedic household. And what level of opulence that was there was phenomenal. We'll continue to text 18. Grihodhyanam kusumitai ramyam bhav amar drumhai ujad vihanga mithunam gayan matta madhuvratam. Translation. Hare Krishna. Anybody wants to read the translation?
Can I read, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, please.
The compound of the main household was surrounded by beautiful gardens with sweet, fragrant flowers and many trees which produced fresh fruit and were tall and beautiful. The attraction of such gardens was that singing birds would sit on the trees, and their chanting voices, as well as the humming sound of the bees, made the whole atmosphere as pleasing as possible. Very good.
Hare Krishna. So, just also again, these verses again elaborating on the environment under which Mother Devavati had to make those austerities. Sometimes when we are in such pleasing environments, it's also very difficult for us to, to focus on austerities. And there's so much of, beautiful things around us. Text 19. Yatra pravishtam atmanam vibudanu charajagu vapyam utpala gandhinyam kardameno palalitam. Translation.
When Devabhuti would enter that lovely garden to take her bath in the pond filled with lotus flowers, the associates of the denizens of heaven, the Gandharvas, would sing about Kardama's glorious household life. Her great husband Kardama gave her all protection at all times.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So Kardama Muni he ensures that the entire environment in which Mother Devavati will be is always sufficient. She's always protected. And here Prabhupada in his purport elaborates about the ideal husband-wife relationship and the dependencies. He says Kardama Muni provided Devavati with all comforts as a husband, but he remained detached from her. Kardama Muni set an example by leaving all family collections once their son Kapiladev grew up. Devavati, despite being qualified and beautiful, depended entirely on her husband's protection. It's an important point that he brings out that, again, in terms of that, we need to be living our life according to the what we have been given as a material body sometimes also. The Manu Samhita states that women should be dependent on their parents in childhood, their husband in youth, and their grown children in old age. I'll not go through the example. I think it's the same thing about example from Manu Samhita, and he connects that to Devati's life, how she lived those principles there. Text 20. Hitva tad ipshitat tat amam apya akhandala yoshitam kinchit chakara vadanam putra vishleshana tura. Translation. Okay. Although her position was unique from all points of view, saintly Devahuti, in spite of all her possessions, which were envied even by the ladies of the heavenly planets, gave up all such comforts. She was only sorry that her great son was separated from her. So, in spite of being in such an opulent environment, she has given up everything with a single-minded focus, which is attachment to the Supreme Person and spiritual existence. Prabhupada further elaborates on this, says that Devoti willingly gave up her material comforts, but was deeply saddened by the separation from her extraordinary son. Can someone please unmute yourself and share why was Devoti saddened by when her son left? Anybody wants to elaborate? Was this material attachment causing it? Hare Krishna. Can you hear me, Prabhuji's Mataji's?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Because she knows he is the Supreme Personality of God.
Yes, Mataji, but the why was she sad? The sadness, was that due to a material attachment?
No, I
She was
think
attached to her son.
the sadness is maybe she is missing some opportunity to serve him as a Supreme Personality of a Godhead.
Yeah, Prabhuji. This is the separation. It's actually the pain of separation. As Prabhupada says, deeply saddened by separation. Her attachment to her son was not ordinary because he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material attachment can be overcome when one develops attachment for the Supreme Person. So you give up, detach on one side, but attach on the other side to the higher purpose, to the higher Supreme Personal. And Bhagavad Gita teaches that a taste for spiritual existence leads to reluctance towards a materialistic way of life. Are we all experiencing that, Prabhujis and Matajis? Reluctance towards a materialistic way of life? We have been, this Krishna question. Yes, Mataji, please tell. Yeah, please share your.
I am at least not feeling reluctant.
Mataji, Maya is so powerful. The moment something comes in front of us, that immediately it sways us. And when we are not in this class or when we are not chanting, we are happily, at least I am sitting happily in the lap of Maya at that point of time. Hopefully, I try to improve in that. So we'll move to the next verse, X21. Vanam pravrajite patya apatya virahatura nyata tatvapya abhunnaste vatse gauriva vatsala. Translation? Anybody wants to read? Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll read. Devothi's husband had already left home and accepted the renounced order of life. And then her only son Kapila left home, although she knew all the truths of life and death. And although her heart was cleansed of all dirt, she was very aggrieved at the loss of her son, just as a cow is affected when her calf dies. So it's such acute pain of separation. I won't go through the entire thing, I won't read it here. But Devothi's grief in that example was compared to a cow crying for her lost calf. And that illustrates, Prabhupada says, the intensity of her emotions and longing for her son's return. A cow is such a soft-hearted creature, and if somebody has seen that or heard that, I have just heard it. I've heard it in another lecture that it moves in such intensity when she loses her calf. That was the intensity of the grief that she was experiencing due to separation from the Lord. So every woman has the potential to qualify herself, Prabhupada says, and have the Supreme Godhead as her son, leading to both the joy of raising a virtuous child in this world and the opportunity for spiritual elevation in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We'll read the next three verses together, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Tam eva dhyayati devam apatyam kapilam harim babhuva chirato vatsa nispritha tadrishe grihe. Translation. Somebody wants to read?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
O Vidura, thus always meditating upon her son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Kapil, she very soon became unattached to her nicely decorated home.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'll read the next verse. Dhyayati bhagavad rupam yad aha dhyana gocharam sutta prasanna vadanam samasta vyasta chintaya. Prabhu, you can read the translation.
Yeah, thereafter, having heard with great eagerness and in all details from her son, Kapilideva, the eternally smiling personality of Godhead, Devabhuti began to meditate constantly upon the Vishnu form of the Supreme Lord.
Hare Krishna. We heard about this form of Vishnu. Mahesh Prabhu had elaborated it so beautifully that you can't forget it. So she meditates constantly upon the form of the Supreme Lord. I'll read these two verses also, and Prabhu, after this you can read the translation, then we'll just quickly glance through the if there are any purport messages from the purport. Bhakti pravaha yogena vairagyena baliyasa yuktanush hana jatena jnanena brahma hetuna vishuddhena tadatmanam atmana vishvato mukham Swanubhutya tirobhuta maya guna visheshanam. Translation, Prabhuji, you can read.
Yeah, translate. Go ahead. Go ahead, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Translation. She did so with serious engagement in devotional service because she was strong in renunciation. She accepted only the necessities of the body. She became situated in knowledge due to realization of the absolute truth. Her heart became purified. She became fully absorbed in meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all the misgivings due to the modes of material nature disappeared. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So the renunciation was the key part also. So as we said, we've seen this actually theme in quite a few verses, detachment and attachment. So on one side, the austerity was there, on the other side, the serious engagement in devotional service was there. And that she accepted only the necessities of the bodies that helped her become situated into realization of the absolute truth. So Prabhupada, in these few verses purports, he has mentioned in for the verse, he talks about elevating spiritual advancement through Krishna consciousness, and he talks about Devavati's constant meditation on her son Kapilideva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It exemplifies the power of Krishna consciousness. He also says that by transferring the attachment to the Supreme Lord, one can become detached from material possession and attachment. And again, two sides of the same coin. You detach on one side and you attach on the other side. Mere knowledge of being a spirit soul or Brahman does not purify intelligence or free one from material attachment. So mere knowledge, book knowledge is not enough. The devotional process involving hearing about the Lord, glorifying his activities and offering service allows one to enter the kingdom of God and attain his association on a spiritual planet. And to verse 26, the purport, he says about how on attaining transcendental bliss through devotional service. Here he elaborates on Devavati's meditation on the Supreme Lord. The form of the Lord led her to realize on the realization of the impersonal Brahman, freeing her from materialistic concepts. He also speaks about the knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead automatically encompasses the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman. We have heard this before also in other lectures by devotees, wherein, the highest stage is bhakti. So when we realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, automatically the Brahman, Paramatma, everything is covered in that. Following prescribed rules and regulations in devotional service is essential for spiritual advancement. So Prabhupada again emphasizes on the importance of following the prescribed rules and regulations. And by engaging in devotional activities, bodily necessities become secondary and one's focus shifts to the engagement of the soul in spiritual life. So Here, and he uses a beautiful analogy in the purport of the dream. Just as in a dream, we forget the various bodies we temporarily inhabit upon walking. Similarly, in Krishna consciousness, we forget our changing material bodies. So in a dream, we can see ourselves also fly. Sometimes we take various shapes, forms, bodies, etc. And but when we are in Krishna consciousness, we can forget about our material body. The fact that this material body will die and we'll acquire another material body, and because we are not this material body. He also uses the analogy of the beating of the husks of wheat. So he says the beating the husks of wheat after the grains have been removed is futile, indicating that without devotional service, endeavors for knowledge or yogic practices alone lack true fulfillment. So we need to go behind the real essence. What is the essence of this whole philosophy that Kapila Muni has said? That is devotional service. If you take out that essence itself, then it's like beating around the husk of wheat. Sorry, I covered the purport of 26 before reading verse 26. I'll just quickly read verse 26 also. Brahmanya avasthita matir bhagavatya atma samshraye nivritta jiva pati vat shina klesha the nivritihi. Translation: her mind became completely engaged in the Supreme Lord, and she automatically realized the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman. As a Brahman realized soul, she was freed from all the designations of the materialistic concept of life. Thus, all material pangs disappeared, and she attained transcendental bliss. Text 27. Nityarudha samadhitvat paravritta guna brahma nasam sasmara tadatmanam swapne drishtam evotitaha. Translation: situated in eternal trance and freed from illusion, impelled by the modes of material nature, she forgot her material body, just as one forgets his different bodies in a dream. So we touched upon this point a bit in the last purport also. So we go to verse 28 now. Taddeha parata posho apyak krishash chadhya asambhavat babhau malair avachanna sadhuma iva pavaka. Somebody want to read the translation? Please.
Shall I read?
Yes, Mataji, please.
Her body was being taken care of by the spiritual damsels created by her husband Kardama. And since she had no mental anxiety at that time, her body did not become thin. She appeared just like a fire surrounded by smoke. Hare Krishna.
So, Devavati, Mother Devavati is, reaching the stage of tranquil bliss. And she's being taken care of also. So Devavati, Mother Devavati remained in the state of transcendental bliss, keeping her mind fixed on the personality of Godhead. The celestial maidservants created by her husband Kardama took care of her physical well-being. Prabhupada says, due to her Krishna consciousness, Devavati was free from mental anxieties, resulting in her body not becoming thin. I didn't get this part though in the purport. I'm not able to explain that further. But although being served by maidservants may seem contradictory to renunciation, Devavati remained pure, resembling fire surrounded by smoke. So even when there is smoke around, the fire retains its inherent beauty. Prabhupada uses the analogy. Similarly, even though Devavati was surrounded by and served by maidservants, it might seem contradictory to renunciation. She remained pure. Similarly, she appeared pure as spiritual despite the presence of material opulence. Now we'll be entering the last section soon. Verse 29. Swangam tapo yogamayam muktakesham gatambaram Daiva Guptam na Bubudhe Vasudeve va Pravishtadi. Translation: because she was always absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she was not aware that sometimes her hair was loosened and or her garments were disarrayed. So she has now surrendered to the Supreme Lord's protection. That's what Prabhupada says. He says that Prabhupada says the word Daiva Guptam highlights the significance of being protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when person has surrendered and is under the protection, he forgets about all these other things that are material. Surrendering to the service of the Lord ensures that he takes charge of maintaining the devotee's body. So once we surrender to Krishna, Krishna will take care of us. He'll take care of maintaining the body. We don't need to be worrying about that. A fully surrendered soul experiences no anxiety about their body's maintenance, as the Supreme Lord cares for all beings. Devahuti's absorption in thoughts of the Supreme Lord made her naturally unconcerned about the protection of her body, knowing it was taken care of by him. Verse 30. Evam sa kapiloktena margena chirata param atmanam brahma nirvanam bhagavantam avapaha. Translation: my dear Vidura, by following the principles instructed by Kapila, Devahuti soon became liberated from material bondage and achieved the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Super Soul without difficulty. So in this purport of 30, Prabhupada elaborates on the attainment of Mother Devahuti, which is she attains the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she followed Kapila's instructions and achieved liberation from material bondage, number one. Now the process of discovery of the absolute truth involves realizing the Super Soul within her heart, Atmanam, attaining Brahma Nirvana, that is freedom from material pangs, and ultimately realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is Bhagavantam. So Devahuti, he says, Prabhupada says, she entered Kapila Vaikunta, one of the innumerable Vaikunta planets. He says the Vaikunta planets are predominated by the expansion of Vishnu, and each planet is known by a particular name of Vishnu, such as Narayana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Vasudeva. So we have a Narayana Vaikunta, Pradyumna Vaikunta, Aniruddha Vaikunta, Vasudeva. Similarly, there's a Kapila Vaikunta, and Mother Devahuti enters Kapila Vaikunta. So Devahuti's journey can be compared, he says, to a gradual process of unfolding, starting from the realizing the Super Soul within the heart, then attaining freedom from material suffering, and finally realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, similar to the progressing from darkness to light or climbing steps to reach a higher platform. Hare Krishna. Now we are almost at the end, Prabhuji and Matajis. Please bear with me for a few more minutes. We'll be done very fast. Tadvirasit punyattamam kshetram trailokya vishrutam namna siddha padam yatra sasam siddhim upeyusi. Translation: that place where Devahuti achieved that perfection, my dear Vidura, is understood to be a most sacred spot. It is known all over the three worlds as Siddhapada. So there are no purports on this particular verse, so I'll continue reading now. So it is known as Siddhapada. I don't know where this is exactly, but if any of the Prabhujis know more about this, be very nice to hear more later. Next 32. Tasyastad yoga viduta martyam abhut sarit srotasam pravara saumya siddha sevita. Dear Vidura, the material elements of our body have melted into water and are now a flowing river, which is the most sacred of all rivers. Anyone who wades in that river also attains perfection, and therefore all persons who desire perfection go bathe there. Now we reach the final section, which is Kapila Muni's activities after he leaves. So Maitreya Muni will further say, he says, Kapilopi Mahayogi Bhagavan Pitur Ashramat Mataram Samanujnapya Udicim Disham Yayau. Does someone want to read this? The translation?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
My dear Vidura, the great says Kapila, the personality of Godhead left his father's hermitage with the permission of his mother and went towards the northeast.
Hare Krishna. I'll read text 34. Akinjan Babu, you can read the translation of text 34 after I read this verse. Siddhacharana Gandharvair Munibhish Chapsaro Gune Ganai Stuyamana Samudrena Dattar Hana Niketana. Translation.
Translation. While he was passing into northern direction, all the celestial denizens, known as Charanas and Gandharvas, as well as the Munis and the damsels of the heavenly planets, prayed and offered him all respects. The ocean offered him oblations and a place of residence.
Hare Krishna. So he first goes north, then goes northeast. Text 35. Aste yogam samasthaya Sankhya charyair abhishtutah Trayanam api lokanam upashantyai samahitah. Hare Krishna. Somebody wants to read the translation?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Even now, one second. Even now, Kapila Muni is staying there in trance for the deliverance of the conditioned souls in the three worlds, and all the acharyas or great teachers of the system of Sankhya philosophy are worshipping him.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So Prabhupada has given a purport for this verse and the previous verse also. So he talks about Kapila Muni's journey and the misrepresentation of Sankhya philosophy. As I said, first Kapila Muni goes north to the Himalayas and then he traces the course of the river Ganges and he reached the delta at the Bay of Bengal. And that place is known as Ganga Sagar. It's there even now, Prabhuji and Mataji. It's close to Calcutta. When I was growing up in Calcutta, I remember, a lot of these people in East India, they go for this Ganga Sagar Yatra. They have every year they go. So the ocean provided him with a residence at Ganga Sagar, where the Ganges meets the sea. Ganga Sagar Tirtha is a sacred place where people still offer respects to Kapila Dev, the original author of Sankhya philosophy. And Prabhupada doesn't you lose the opportunity again to call out the imposters. Also, he says the Sankhya system has been misrepresented by an impostor also named Kapila, which differs from the teachings described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, we'll go to the final section, which is the Palashruti, 36 and 37 verse. Etan nigaditam tata yat prishtoham tavanaga kapilasya cha samvado deha hutyascha pavanaha. Krishna, someone can read the translation.
My dear son, since you have inquired for me, I have answered, O sinless one. The description of Kapila Dev and his mother and their activities are the purest of all pure discourses.
Text 37. Ya idam anushrinoti yo viddhate Kapila muner matam atma yoga guhyam Bhagavati kritadhi suparnaketa labhate bhagavat padaravindam. Krishna, can somebody read the final purport, the final translation?
The descriptions of the dealings of Kapila Dev and his mother is very confidential, and anyone who hears and reads this narration becomes a devotee of Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is carried by Garuda, and he thereafter enters into the abode of Supreme Lord to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada has given only purport of verse 37. It says that perfection is attained through devotional service. And it goes on and says, hearing or reading the confidential narration of Kapiladeva and his mother makes one a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By becoming a devotee, one enters the abode of the Supreme Lord and engages in the transcendental loving service. Devahuti's perfect example shows that following the instructions of Kapiladeva leads to the highest perfection of human life. Through this narration, one achieves the goal of engaging in the loving service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So verse 36 and 37, as I said, is a Falashruti. One who hears or teaches this knowledge, concentrating his mind on the Lord, attains the Lord. Hare Krishna, Dandot Pranam. That brings us to an end of the 33rd chapter of the 3rd canto, which is also the end of the 3rd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the status quo. Thank you very much, everybody, and all of you. Congratulations for completing 3 cantos that we have successfully completed in terms of reading. I want to thank all the Prabhujis and Matajis who have been very sincere in attending and have been encouraging all of us preachers, at least me, to and giving me this opportunity to be Krishna conscious. A big thank you to Lilananda Prabhu for giving me this opportunity. Also to all the senior devotees, Praveen Prabhu, Subbarao Prabhu, Padvat Pranam. Please forgive me if I made any mistakes also. That is due to my ignorance. And we can have a few questions before we close the call. We have 2 more minutes left. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Satyadev.
Prabhuji, just a question. It's not a question, but here Kapil Dev is giving this knowledge to Mother Devabhuti, but similarly, like we have Yashoda Maya, but Krishna, even though he has done so many pastimes in front of her, but she, and again, she goes into the Maya and always thinks that Krishna is her son. So I'm just trying to relate Mother Devabhuti here and also Yashoda Maya. Like here Devabhuti, Mother Devabhuti, she realized that Kapil Dev is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in Yashoda Maya case, even though he has done so many pastimes, but she was never able to reveal that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just any thoughts, Prabhuji?
So one thing that comes to mind, Prabhu, is that in Vrindavan, the Brajavasis don't treat Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not in awe or reverence. So that's what I have read, but I would request, I see Lilananda Prabhu and Giriraj Prabhu also on the call. Praveen Prabhu, anything you want to add, Prabhu, more to that? Why, any other reason why Yashoda Ma is not seeing
Prabhuji, Pranam. Hare Krishna, Pranam. Prabhuji, that is what they wanted. See, that is an exchange of rasa between Krishna and his devotees. Yashodamai wanted a son, and she wanted to exchange the rasa of a son, and she didn't want the feeling that he is Supreme Personality of God. Otherwise, there is no love of a son. Vatsalya rasa won't come, right? See, if you always think he's Supreme Personality of God, she won't be running around with a stick, like just like a child. A mother runs around, behind a child, and she won't be able to do all that. And that is what Krishna is reciprocating with. See, just like how you wanted it to be, and Krishna reciprocates in that way. And even Rajvasi is the same thing. They wanted, these are all Rishimunis from Treta Yuga, right? And they wanted to exchange the rasa, the conjugal love with Krishna, and he reciprocated with that. And that's why all of them feel that he's his brother, sister, or like, lover. And that is what they wanted, and Krishna is giving them that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much. So it's a more like a desire. It's a desire of the devotee. And
Yes,
that's why Krishna is
Prabhu. 100%. He reciprocates as you wish, and he gives you, if you're qualified, he gives you that.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Lilananda Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat pranam, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the class, Prabhuji. It was a very wonderful way to finish the third canto. Very grateful.
Thank you, Prabhu. Good to see you. Okay, Prabhu, Prabhuji and Mataji, I think Praveen Prabhu, we can conclude the class if there are no more questions or any comments. Hare Krishna.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Mancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo koti vaishnavavrinda ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji and Mataji, wish you a very, very happy Ekadashi once more. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji. Thank
Krishna.
you.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very
Prabhu
much.
ki jai.
Hare Krishna.